Okay. Let's do this. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we are going to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists of all time. Today we're going to be looking at the art of Sonia Delaunay. And Sonia Delaunay, I think, is one of the greatest artists of all time. I wouldn't say I'm alone in that, but she certainly has... there's been different points in time where she's been neglected and has not received her due, at least globally. In France, where she spent most of her life, she certainly she was awarded the Legion of Honor, so it's not like she was completely forgotten. But as might sound familiar to many people watching, her husband, Robert Delaunay, was for a long time far more well regarded than she was. And I think really over the past maybe even 5-10 years, her reputation has been given its more necessary due, because not only was she a great painter, but she was also a major figure in fashion and set design and costume design, furniture design, interior design, muraling. She painted cars. I mean, she did a little bit of everything. And as we'll see, as we're going to look at some of her art here, she was also a really interesting person. She also, like the paintings that she made, these bright, beautiful, highly patterned colors. We also see in the clothes that she would wear. And we're talking, she was walking around Paris wearing outfits that looked not too dissimilar to the painting we're going to recreate today here, this Electric Prisms painting, but she would wear these clothes, right? So you can imagine 100 years ago, someone walking around in an outfit like this would be quite shocking. I mean, it would be quite shocking to see someone walking around anywhere in the world like this, but we're sort of more used to it. But anyway, I think she was a trailblazer for sure, and I'm super excited to do a little bit of a deeper dive in on her work. Okay, so let's, before we get too far here, I just want to give a couple of housekeeping things. This is the plan of attack. Today's painting is a pretty simple, straightforward painting. I mean, we can make it as complex as we want. I'm going to try to paint it in about as simple of a way as possible so that even an absolute beginner can work on this painting. So what we'll do to get started is we're going to look at how to get the image actually onto the canvas. I've done a template to make it a lot easier for you, but if you need help drawing it, I'm going to do a quick little drawing to help. We're going to get the canvas primed. That's called the Imprimatura. Then while that's drying, we're going to talk a little bit about the biography of Sonia Delaunay. And then again, some of these steps, which is usually sort of kind of going back and forth between foreground and background, we're probably going to simplify, which we would normally do anyway for an abstract painting, because really we don't necessarily have the same foreground-background relationships as we might, you know, if we were painting the Gainsborough's Blue Boy, right, which is a lot more complex of a painting. So things are going to be a little bit more simplified. And then, of course, at the very end, we'll do the side-by-side comparison. So if you're watching this video after it was aired live, which is where I am right now, you can look at the timestamp below and jump right to the very ending and look at it and go, oh yeah, that turned out not too bad. I think I will go back and paint along with him. Maybe he knows a little bit of what he's talking about. So, just before I get going here, a couple ways that you could support this channel and the work that we've been doing over the past few years is just hitting the subscribe button, notification bell, so that you know when the upcoming videos are happening. There's links down below for all of the materials that I'm using on Amazon, and if you click on those links and you buy things, then you don't pay anything extra, but I get 1 penny from all of that. If you want to leave a donation, there's some links, and those are down below as well. There's the YouTube super chat function, which you can also use, because we're going to make this painting in real time, and any mistakes we make, you'll see how I overcome all of those obstacles. Knock on wood, right? We'll see if we can make it happen. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to do the image transfer. And the image transfer is, I'm going to show you where where is, there it is, oops. I always think I'm going to have everything completely primed. I'll show you that there is this Dropbox folder. And in the Dropbox folder, you're going to see a whole, and the link is down below in the video description. And there's, I think, about 150 folders in here. These are all paintings that we've already done. So if you're like, oh, this is kind of interesting, I might want to watch a few more of these. You've got a lot of stuff to keep you busy. Artists from all over the world, all ages, all genders, races, religions, because there's great artists from every culture, right? So, but we are, since this is one of our intro painting classes, we're right at the very top, right? These are all the very basic classes we've done, and the materials to support those. Here we're going to click in under Sonia Delaunay, and you're going to see there's actually a bunch of files here. So those files actually relate to, we have the original, the painting that she did, and then an outline that I did using my iPad Pro and the Procreate app. I just traced the image out. But there's also a few more paintings. If you are really fast and you want to do something else in addition, here's another painting that she did. She used these for some textile designs that she created for clothing. And then here's another one, and then the outline for that. So you've got a lot to kind of keep you busy, should you so wish to be busy. Let's go back up to here to the image transfer. So once if you download that outline from the Dropbox folder, and you can print it out on your printer at home, inkjet, laserjet printer, they all work very well. Then I'm gonna show you how to transfer this. So, oh, we've got a few here. These are from the last couple days. So I'm going to play this and then talk over top of things. So we're going to be using a 9x12 sized canvas. Where is it? Come on, let's get this. So the 9x12 sized canvas board, you can buy them off of Amazon. Again, there's a link in the description below. You can get them from the dollar store. The ones I found that I've been buying tend to be just a little bit higher quality than the cheapest ones you can buy, and they're only an extra $1. So they're $2 instead of $1. You see I'm using the carbon transfer paper. Carbon transfer paper works really well for this process, but there are other ways to do it. You can just draw a whole bunch of dark lines on the back side of any piece of paper, and then transfer it by pressing a little bit harder with your pencil on the other side. I showed how to do that in one of the very beginning episodes of this whole series, and so that video is linked below. And I just use a pencil or pen. I like using red or blue or green or some other color to make it easier for you to see exactly what the lines were at one point. Okay. So, actually, I think I want, sorry, 1 second here. So, once that's all done, you've got your image printed out and transferred onto the canvas. That is weird. That's not working for me. Well, let's do this again. There we go. So that's my image transferred onto this simple canvas. I'm going to save this. You can certainly paint on it if you like, but if you're not happy with the way it turns out, you can make infinite amount of transfers until you get it just the way you want. Now you can see I've also maybe simplified things. I didn't do all of the sketchy lines of the original because really I'm just going to paint over everything. So I don't want you to get too overwhelmed at this point on how to do this. In fact, we can draw this out very, very quickly. So let's just do that. So I don't usually do this at the beginning of every episode, but I just thought for anyone who might be, you know, just getting started and might want a little bit of extra help, let's just show you how I could really, really quickly draw the original image onto a, oops, come on. Okay. So if I was going to try to draw this image, what I would look for is the center of the picture, right? And you could do this by drawing a line up and down the middle if that helps. And if that's the center, then I think like we've got kind of a circle here. We've got another one kind of in here. We got these sort of concentric circles, right? And you can see I'm not really concerned about making these things straight at all. Right? Now there are little divisions in between here, all that kind of stuff, but I'm just going to keep on moving forward. Right here, if we want to make another one here. Because if you want, you can do all of the colors exactly as they appear. But maybe you want to have a little bit of fun and play around with some different colors. Right? There's certainly, what we're just going to be focusing on today is just learning how to kind of mix colors and have a little bit of fun. So you'll just keep that line there. So, you know, that might not be absolutely perfect, but if that's probably enough to get you going. And as I said, I could take my pencil and go like this over top of the entire surface of the canvas, really kind of cover it pretty dark. And then I put it on my canvas and then just trace over these lines and you'll have something that looks similar to this, right? Okay. So let's get going here onto our next step. So the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to coat this canvas with some color, right? And you don't have to do this step. If you wanted, you could just put a very thin white over top of the pencil lines, or just skip it entirely. But I think, you know, I'm trying to introduce people to the basics of painting as the masters did it, right? I know if most people on YouTube do not follow this whole thing. I teach at the best university in Canada, and my goal is to try to build people into professional artists and show them exactly how the greatest artists of all time worked. So that's what I'm trying to impart with you today. So I'm going to show you the Imprimatura technique. Now, just before we get started, I'm just going to do a 20-second review of the different brands of paint that I use, because this has come up over the last couple of episodes. And so I just want to kind of show you, I'm not going to spend any time explaining this. We did this in one of the very first intro painting episodes, but I'll just show this on the screen here just for anyone who's trying to like, what colors are you using? What are the names of the colors? So the kind of the most well-known brands, we had the Amsterdam paint, which is what I'm using. Golden paint is also very well known. Globally, Liquitex is also really well known. You're going to notice that a lot of the names are very similar, right? We're going to use ultramarine blue is a very common, probably the most common warm blue. Cerulean blue is also probably one of the most common cool blues. You'll see that we have magenta, which is one of the most common cool reds. And then we have our cadmium red, tends to be mostly a warm red, but you can see there's cadmium red medium, cadmium red dark, cadmium red light. I would go for a medium or dark if the company makes them. And then we have in our, oops, that's, just want to make sure I'm not sure I skipped through here. Here's the buzz. So with the yellows, we have yellow, cadmium yellow light, and then maybe a cadmium yellow medium or cadmium yellow dark or something around there. Here's another brand. These ones I didn't cover in the other one because I just this afternoon, like, let's sit down and let's make sure we've covered all the bases so anyone else needs them. Okay. Right. Lemon yellow, if you're the company you're buying paints from does not make a cadmium yellow light, then lemon yellow is 100% a cool yellow because it's leaning towards those greens, right? And we'll get into that as we go. Oh, before we get into the artist biography, let's actually do our Imprimatura. So, the way that I do this, which is very unique, is that I'm going to put my warm yellow onto the canvas, and I dilute it with a little bit of with just some water. It doesn't have to be warm water, but it just helps this dry a little bit faster, and also dilutes the paint ever so slightly. So put a little bit on there, maybe twice as much toothpaste as you put on your toothbrush, and a little bit of water. You could use some matte medium for this exercise to do this. The matte medium is probably ultimately the better choice, and what it will also do will help kind of fill in some of the texture of your canvas. I always find it's a lot easier to paint on smoother surfaces, but that's personal preference. There's certainly some artists that really love a super textured surface to paint on. Personally, I find the less texture, the easier it is to paint. The brush just sort of glides over the surface. And I think often what I see when I teach classes in person is that people they get frustrated with the paint coming off the brush too fast because the texture is sort of scraping the paint off of the paint bristles. And so what they start doing is they start putting lots of water, mixing water into their acrylic paint to get a little bit more of a thinner paint that will spread a little bit easier. And that makes sense, and it does work, but it's also going to make that color dramatically more transparent, right? Just remember that that's how we clean our acrylic brushes, is with water. So if you're putting water in your paint all the time, then you're going to be essentially breaking that paint down and making it so thin to the point where there's nothing keeping the paint on the canvas, right? Because paint is just pigment and a binder, some kind of basically a glue. Acrylic paint is a plastic material that is not too different from white glue, just a little bit higher quality than your kind of house, school glue that you can see in elementary schools, kind of thing. And then there's oil paint, which is a linseed oil binder. There's tempera paint. There's watercolor paint, gouache. There's latex house paint. There's, so you can see there's lots of different materials that one can use to bind the pigment together and onto the surface. Okay, so now that we've got the Imprimatura, the painting primed with the first layer, that's what this is called, let's take a look at the biography of Sonia Delaunay. And we're going to do a kind of a quick little summary of her life, because I find her a really interesting person, as well as her work. And I think it's always kind of helpful to, when we're getting to know an artist, to know a little bit, when we're painting artwork, to know a little bit about who it was that made that painting. I find it so much more of a richer experience for me personally. Just before I launch even further down, I just want to remind everyone that there is a private Facebook group just for people that, like yourself, that are painting along, so that it's an awesome community of people on here. I love the group of people that we've gathered here, and you can upload your artwork, and everyone else can take a look and get inspired by it and comment on it, and to give you some supportive reassurance that you're on the right track, as well as if you ask a question, or you've got, you want some help solving a problem with your paintings. It's a great community of people but some of whom are brand new. Some people have been painting with me for a couple of years. So this is awesome. Look at that, Charmaine. Rock and roll. Awesome. And also, just as a little tidbit, another reason to join the group is I usually write a bit of a biography here that I post, so which has a little, might be a little bit more detailed, depending on what you think, than what I'm about to describe right here. But this is sort of all the condensed research that I put together for every episode. So let's talk a little bit about Sonia Delaunay, born 1885 in Odessa, Ukraine, which at that point was occupied by Russia, and may soon be reoccupied by Russia at the time we're taping this, which would be a horrible shame, but dies in 1979, so lives a nice, long life. Dies at age 94 in Paris, where she spent really the last maybe 60 years of her life, I would say. So let's just take a kind of a, very interesting kind of tour that she took. So she was born Sarah Elevnia Stern, and to kind of a working class Jewish family, and her mother sent her to live with her brother in St. Petersburg, Russia, at a relatively, I think about age 7, I think she moved there. And Henry Turk was her brother, and eventually Henry and Anna, who became her parents because they adopted her from her original parents, her birth family, and they were much wealthier and provided her with a totally different type of a lifestyle than she was born into in Ukraine. And that family summered in Finland, which sounds kind of funny. You're like, going to Finland to summer? Really? That's interesting. But coming from Russia, Finland, I guess, is a little bit warmer during the summer. And, they toured around Europe. They went to art galleries together and were drawing as a family in museums. And that really inspired the creative side of the young Sarah. Now, at some point, she changes her name from Sarah to Sonia Turk. And then eventually her last name changes again when she marries Robert, about, another 20 years later. So she studies in Germany and then in Paris. And when she's in Paris, she has a kind of a marriage of convenience, as it was once called, where her husband was a gay man who, still in many places in the world, that is... can lead to arrest or the death penalty. Anyway, she marries this fellow who is a prominent art gallery owner, Wilhelm Unde, and that provides her the opportunity to meet some of the most famous artists living in Paris at the time. And you think about like the early 1900s in Paris, that is the epicenter of the art world, right there. And she's living in the Montparnasse neighborhood, where that's where all the great artists' studios are, where Picasso and Matisse, and I mean the list, all of the, Gauguin, Rousseau, all of the greats are living in that area. Although, I guess Rousseau, would he have been Gauguin? They must have. Those two fellows, I think, would have died right around this time. I'm not sure if they. I don't think she would have met them, but that actually is an interesting story because later on, they owned one of Rousseau's paintings and sold it in order to survive. Which that's a whole around World War II. Let me see. She also, through her husband, quote-unquote husband, is introduced to Robert Delaunay, who eventually, a year later, becomes her real husband, I guess you could call it. And they have a son, Charles, and their family is still providing some money, again, sending money regularly from St. Petersburg, although that ends shortly afterwards when World War I breaks out. Now, what I think is kind of beautiful about this relationship between Sonia and Robert is they end up having an art style that is very similar. And again, as I mentioned off the top, that Robert, for a long time was, the Delaunay, and Sonia was sort of this, asterisk in the corner. Even it's interesting, having taught this class a few times, putting research together. If you type Delaunay into Google, his name was the main name that would pop up over just the last few years. And I know how Google does its search, but her name has sort of seems to be kind of outranking his now, which I think is probably deservedly so, because her accomplishments are far more wide-ranging than his. He certainly accomplished a lot as a painter, but she also accomplished a lot as a painter and, as I mentioned earlier, in all these other spheres. So they at this time, Cubism is becoming kind of the fad around the world. Braque and Picasso, also living in Paris at this time, kind of start this revolution. But Cubism famously is browns and blacks and grays, this pretty kind of dour color scheme, right? And what I think is kind of what's interesting is, as a new mother, Sonia starts sewing these blankets together for her young son Charles, and she kind of makes these cubist-like blankets, using cubist kind of patterns, these squares and rectangles and hard edges, but she's sewing them with these bright, beautiful colors that she obviously becomes more and more associated with. And one of their good friends, Guillaume Apollinaire, is there any mention about that in here? Apollinaire is really, here he is, one of the most famous poets in Paris at the time, and he sort of coins the term Orphism to help describe this particular style of painting that the Delaunays are innovating, which to kind of contrast it with Cubism, and yeah, because we could also go there was synthetic Cubism, which was kind of a little bit like Orphism, but still a little bit not quite as exuberantly joyful as Orphism became. I also think it's interesting, again, not only like she's collaborating with a number of people, and one of the earliest collaborations that she has is Blaise Sandar, and they make who's another poet, and together they create this. I wonder if there's an image of it here. Let's just start looking at. Okay, so here it is. They make this like a accordion book, and they make it, it's hand published and folded together, but it is hugely successful. Like, everyone has now, this book starts to disseminate. It's lots of people are buying copies of it, and it becomes quite kind of like her calling card that again introduces her to more and more people, gets her more and more respect. And shortly after this, we're talking 1913, World War I breaks out, and World War I breaks out while the Delaunays are vacationing in, I think, Madrid, Spain, and they decide to kind of make a temporary base there. And while they're there, she meets Sergei Diaghilev, the famous ballet russe, the Russian ballet impresario, and he commissions Sarah to do all the costumes and Robert to design the sets for his new play or dance, Cleopatra, as well as a few others afterwards. And again, that opens even more doors. Right now she's designing clothing, and that just, the explosion of creativity just starts radiating. So, you know, we see here's a dress, but she was making bathing suits, like fairly skimpy bathing suits in the, you know, prior to like around 1920, kind of stuff that if you were to show up on a beach in Mazatlan or Cabo, you would fit right in. In fact, people would be like, whoa, that is really cool. Where did you get that? And you say, oh, from a museum. This is 100-year-old's bikini, right? She wasn't making bikinis. I don't think they'd been invented at the time, but anyway. This, by the way, I love this painting, the flamenco dancer, and we did this painting about 2 years ago in the earlier iteration of this class. So if you're interested, you can go watch that episode. I'm sure there's a link in the description below for that. And I don't know if today's painting is in here either. We'll talk about that. So you can see all of her fashion illustrations in here. I just love these, right? Here's some of the costume designs she created, and then she's making all of these fabric, like, or patterns for fabric. She opens her own studio where she's making not only clothing but textiles for furniture, for wallpaper. I mean, on and on and on. Like, just one of the most creative human beings I think that ever lived, right? There was like an edition, I think, of 50 different patterns that she developed, that she sold as a kind of a book, but that anyone could order those fabrics from. And, you know, customers like Gloria Swanson, you know, huge Hollywood celebrities were wearing her clothes and posing with them, you know, on the Oscar red carpet. Here you see these gigantic murals she did. I wonder if there's an image of the car that she painted towards the end of her life. And then I promise we'll jump right into the painting here in a second. Is there anything? Isn't that, I love that image. That would be another one that I would love to do at one point. Okay. I wonder if, is there a photo of this car? So here, I think she did 2 of these cars. I'm pretty sure there's another one of them. Okay. There's tons of links here. The avant-garde queen of loud, wearable art. Let me see. Like, can you imagine these bright, like, patterned colors? Like, if you were walking around on a beach today, that would turn heads. You know, coupled with an umbrella. We're going to be doing a portrait, actually, that precedes today's painting on Thursday, that is a little bit more complex. You know, here's a coat made for Gloria Swanson, right, as I said here. Let's see, anything else? She made her own card. I mean, it goes on and on. So let's get right into the painting here. Okay, this looks like this is nice and dry, and I think we're ready to go. So typically, another thing that we might do before we begin a painting is do what's called an underpainting. And an underpainting is not the same as an underdrawing, but typically an underpainting might be done by an artist to paint over top of, if there were pencil lines here, and let's say it was a really complex image, we might paint over top of some of these lines so that we can see them when we paint other colors over top of it. I don't think we're going to do that today, because today is going to be more like a paint by numbers kind of session. But if you were feeling like that the image was getting overwhelmed with paint and you're starting to lose the structure of it, what you could do is just take a dark color. You could mix your own black, or you could just use a black or dark blue, and you could paint over many of these lines. Right? I'm not going to do that, but I just want to let you know that that might be what many people might do. Okay, so also at this point, if we had a figure and a background, what we might do, what we would usually do is paint the background first, and then or at least do a pass, is what I call it, and then do a pass on the foreground, go back to the background. We're not going to do that. Let's just launch right into things. So, speaking of which, let's get some paint on the palette. And as I just showed, for anyone who's just joining me, I mentioned what these exact colors were and where you can, which ones are warm and cool for all these different brands. So hopefully we won't have some of the confusion we've had over the last couple of episodes with people questioning what these are and the names. I think the names are kind of, the reason why I just say warm red and cool red is because, as we just saw, most of those brands use slightly different names for each of these colors, so it can be confusing. As long as you're using, a warm and a cool of each of our 3 primary colors, you'll be more than fine. And then lastly, I'm going to use a little bit of white as well, because we're going to mix a little bit of white into some of these colors. Won't need too much of it. But, white tends, traditionally white is the most commonly used color in any palette, because often artists are using it to just get either to cover up other colors, or just to slightly modify colors, or to make grays, etc., or skin tones, right? So Donna says, I'm going big tonight, 16 by 20 inches and no transfer. You're drawing it all out. That is super exciting. Wow, look at all the comments here. So there's Donna's here, Rachel. Everyone's saying hello. There's Pascal. Hey, Pascal. There's Lori and Sandra. Awesome. Ravi. So we got the whole crew back together. Great. Okay, so let's bring up the painting again, and let's just take a moment just to think about how we'll do the painting. I mean, we can really start anywhere. In a painting like this, it's not like we have to start with the reds or the greens or blues, or, I mean, so that's while I think about it, a good idea to have a little bit of tea. As I really think having some sort of like a beverage while you're painting gives you like, all joking aside, it's great to have something that you can just be like, let's just take a second, take a deep breath, especially if things aren't going well. Rather than just tearing up your paper and walking away, just take a sip of tea. Okay, what's really going on? Is it actually a disaster, or potentially have we created something new? Anyway, I digress. Where should we begin? I'll probably start with some blues, because I will put a little bit of white into my blue, because in fact, let's just show what happens if I start painting blue. Because I'm going to start, let's go to a smaller brush here. And one of the things also, let's get one idea out of your mouth, Michael. If I paint, let's say, a blue, let's say I try to paint this blue right here, this dark blue, and I'm taking my warm blue, my ultramarine blue, and if I paint this right here, it's going to be pretty dark, right? Potentially too dark, right? It doesn't look too bad right now. That's because it's still pretty wet. But if I'm just going to let this sit there, and then I'm going to do a different blue elsewhere, just so we can again see the difference, right? Because there's a little bit of the warm yellow coming through, and I like that, right? I like how it mixes and it darkens it, but it's not necessarily always desirable. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a bit of white, and let's just do this again in a different area. Now I put a lot, maybe a little bit too much white in here, but that's okay, right? How about, let's put this here. Now again, that might look not like this color that I just painted, but if I wait for this to dry and then I paint the same blue that I did here without any white in it over top, I'm going to get this really nice, lush ultramarine blue. All right, so I'm just going to let that sit there. And then how about, I'm going to paint this around. The canvas, you know, her painting, her canvas was, you know, this got cropped off, but I've got a little bit of extra room on my side, so I can make that fit. So anywhere else I might need this blue, I'm going to paint this same thing down here. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to be using a bit of this technique. Let's just see this right here. The way that she's also painting a lot of this painting is with this sort of, you know, I don't know what you call it. It's almost like I'm sweeping or something. Now, at this moment, with this color, we're not really going to notice much, right? And her color is actually, it's a little bit more of like a dry brush that we're seeing down here. But again, today is a very intro class, so I don't want you to get too worked up on technique. Let's just think maybe a little bit more about mixing colors and how we mix the colors, rather than like all the different, because that can get really overwhelming. Like, oh my goodness, there's so many different ways that artists can apply paint on the canvas. Oh, I'm having a hard enough time just mixing colors, right? So I don't want you to get overwhelmed. Let's, I'm going to paint this area right up top here. In fact, let's just take a look here. So I'm going to paint this blue up here. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. But let's just, again, we'll look at it over here. Now, maybe I've painted it in the wrong place, and that's okay. I think there was maybe a bit of yellow supposed to be here, so I'll just wipe that a bit away with my finger. That's okay. You always got the white paint that if you make a mistake, you can always use white just to cover up your mistakes. That's what I love about acrylic paint. It's so forgiving. Right? Wouldn't it be nice if other aspects in life were as forgiving as acrylic paint? You can see I'm kind of ignoring some of my lines, and I don't know, do I want to make this like a circle? Like I could, or do I want it just to go straight up? I don't know. Maybe I'll make it kind of oval shape. Right? I get to decide whatever I want to do with my paintings, and you get to do the same thing with yours. So, any place that I think I need a bit of a blue, or at least this warmer blue, that's what I'm going to put down there. And you know what? I'm going to keep that like that, just so you can see it. I want to paint over it, but let me paint over it later. Let's just let that stay for a bit. Okay. Oh, there's this one right here too, so let's maybe zoom in on that. So just right here is what I'm going to work on. And maybe why don't we zoom in and just see some of the texture here. And what I like about her paintings at this time particularly is just like, look how kind of, she's not worried about making everything sharp. We could see some of the canvas showing through there, some of that color. And so she looks like she's having a lot of fun when she's painting, right? There's just, you know, color sort of over top of other colors. There's a lot of playfulness in her approach to painting. Okay, so once I've got that done, let's think about what I need to do next. Now there are other blues in here. This other blue down here, though, I think is a bit of a cooler blue, right? And I know that might be a little bit confusing for people to trying to identify warm and cool colors, but that's what we did, a whole episode on warm and cool colors. Oh, there's Kathy and Roxana. Look at that. Awesome. I think Kathy was here. Maybe she was first. My apologies if I skipped you there, Kathy. Okay, so let's take a little bit more white again. We're going to mix here with our cool blue this time, however. So you could see just different kind of blue, so we get a different kind of result. This one, I don't know, what would you say? It's got a sea foam like kind of quality, right? And this is why it's helpful to have a cool blue and a warm blue, because if I wanted this color and I only had ultramarine blue, there's no way I would be able to get that color, right? So what we're using here is our split primary palette, and that helps us get a whole new range of colors that are usually kind of off limits. Alright, so just right down here. I'm just going to paint it right through onto the other side. And don't worry about going in, doing it all in the lines or breaking out of the lines. You could just go nuts. You don't even have to paint these colors where I'm painting them. You could paint them wherever you want. You could use whatever colors you like. Anywhere else with this cooler blue? We've got cool blue here, but it's a little bit more, there's a little bit more blue in it. But I'm really going to paint, I'm going to paint this whole thing a bit more like that. And then I'm going to paint over it. Right, so this is where I just was. Anything else? Oh, I missed a little bit of warm blue up here. So how about, I'm just going to show you how it's okay just to kind of mix things up. I'm going to take a little bit. I'm not even going to bother washing my brush. I don't think you have to. I'm just going to paint this in here. Now you can see almost the color that I put down here would kind of work pretty well here. So, but you know what? Let's just take... I'm just going to kind of do that. I'm just going to take my warm blue and paint that in here with... Okay. I think that's good enough for at this exact moment. Oh, there was a little bit of that down here. I missed that too. and you don't have to like do it all. You don't have to worry about like, oh, I missed. Oh, how on earth? How could I have been so stupid to have missed? I mean, if you miss it, then you just paint it again later, just like I just did. Right? No big deal. So I think let's. I'm gonna just clean this brush because now I've got two different blues on there, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But I think I'm gonna go to making some of these cool greens that we see in the kind of right in around here. Right, they're really intense green. So to do that, I kind of would want to have just my cool blue, my cool yellow, so that, because otherwise if I got this warm blue in here, it's gonna kind of just muddy that color up a little bit. So let's look at this. Let's take some of this, where should we, let's do it right here. So we just mix our cool blue and our cool red together. And we're gonna get this nice, just like beautiful emerald color. And we're gonna expect that when we paint it over top of this warm yellow background, that it might get a little bit darker. It might not have quite the pop that it would have on a white background. I don't mind that, but if you really wanted, what you could do is just add a little bit of white to this color, and then do what we're going to do with these blues here later is when, if we have that white, it's going to kind of cover up a little bit and get you a little bit more saturated color. Personally, I think this is more than fine for my purpose, but so I'm just taking more of this warm yellow and warm green, or sorry, cool yellow and cool green, my apologies. And you know, once we've got these colors down, we can also modify them. We can go back over and darken some of them a little bit if we want. You know, look, I went a little bit out of the line, which is not a bad thing, but I kind of wanted to keep a little bit of the shape of this circle. So I just kind of wipe that away, and I can also go around and clean that up if I should wish later on. What else needs this green? I'm going to add a little bit of white in here in a moment. Now, I'm a little confused with all of this stuff happening here, so there might be some of the wrong colors, quote unquote, in this area shortly. So I'm just going to throw these guys in here. Same thing here. Okay, I think that's okay for right now. So what I'm going to do now is just take a little bit of white, mix this in, and then I'm going to go into this area here. Again, you can see these sort of little tiny, the way like these brush strokes are, again, like sweeping, right? Kind of up and back and forth. And I think there's even a little bit, let's do a bit of that right on here. Get a bit more white, and we get this kind of like winter fresh green. Doesn't look too different than what we just painted down here, because there's not that much yellow left in here, but we could certainly add more. Let's do that up here. And if you want more white, I can just take a little bit more white and actually just paint it right on top of here. Same thing. It's kind of mixing into that color, so maybe not quite as much of the effect as I would have liked. But we still got a little bit of a ways to go. In fact, this area right here, I'm just going to paint, I think this is supposed to be a bit of a cooler blue. but I think this cooler green is at least okay for right now. Okay. So my plan is I just want to go over the painting, just get all the colors basically in the right place, and then potentially I'll be happy and I could just call it a day. Or if I really want to continue on it, I can just kind of modify and give a little bit more of the nuance that she has in her painting. So I'm just going to continue with, let's do the red now, right? Let's do red. So how about let's start with our, let's start with warm red, right? So our warm reds, there's a mostly warm red. We have some cooler reds that become more magenta, more purpley kind of towards the bottom. But for the most part, we've got warmer reds in this painting, right? All of these. So let's just take, oops, a second for that to reboot. Come on. When that happens, it means it's time for a sip of tea. Roxana says, "Thank you, Michael. I'm already doing my own colors. I'm happy that you agree." Yes, absolutely. I think this is a great opportunity to be really expressive with color. Right? You don't have to worry about matching what I did or what Sonia did. You should feel liberated to do whatever you like. Now, again, just like I did with the blues, if I paint this, in fact, let's just do a little bit, where is it going to be a little bit darker? Let's see if I paint this warm red up here. It's okay. And probably you won't notice too much of a difference on camera, but I'm going to add a little bit of white on here. Again, if I was painting on a white background, you wouldn't have to do any of this. But since I got this kind of nice Imprimatura down here, I'm going to put in a little bit of white into my red. And that's going to give it just a little bit of a... it's going to help I'm going to go back over top with this same warm red without white later. And it's just going to really help make these colors pop just that much more. So I'm just going to go kind of maybe even over a lot of where all my red is going to be. And you know what? I'm going to paint that red too. And I'll paint maybe a little bit lighter red in that place later on. Let's do the same thing down here. Where else? Let's continue this. So it's kind of going in a bit pink, and that's okay. Let's do this here. Get even more white in my red, my warm red. Put that there. Okay, in fact, I'm just continue. Oh, there's still a few more over here. Actually, so now I'm going to take this warm red. I'm going to put just a little bit of warm yellow into this color. It's going to be just a slightly more peachy color. Oops, there's a lot of white. And that color is kind of nice for maybe down here. And you can certainly leave little gaps of paint here, right? You don't have to worry about covering up the whole background. Usually that's what I like to do when I'm painting. But in a painting like this, I feel like we can have a little bit more liberties. Now this area is going to get darker with purple over top of it. But I think she's got this color underneath. So I'm just going to paint that right there. And I got a little bit of this paint mixing a bit, and it gets a little bit dirty. I don't mind that either. Anywhere else that needs a peachy color? Maybe I'll paint this peachy color here. Oh, it's kind of mixing. Not turning out the way, that didn't turn out the way I really wanted, but that's okay too. And how about, I'm just going to take this color without even bother really washing my brush. I'm just going to add a little bit more of my warm yellow in here. It's going to go a bit more, well, it's still kind of peachy. That's okay. I'll paint this here, and I'll just go over top of it with an orange later on. In fact, I'll paint that, and I'll paint that orange later on. Hey, let's just do this right here too. Why not? I've been keeping a close eye out for the paint police lately. I think they're hot on my trail, so if anything should happen and I just suddenly disappear and the feed goes dark, you know they've gotten to me, right? For crimes against painting. So let's take my warm yellow. I'm going to make a little bit, more of an orange. I'm going to paint this in here. Now this color on its own is kind of orangey. I just want to make it a bit more orangey. So adding a little bit of warm red to my warm yellow. And then I'll paint that in here. I've got kind of a bunch of areas that are kind of orangey. Oops, that's a darker blue. That's okay. See, I made a little boo-boo. That's okay. And I think she's got white over top of here, but I'll paint that a little bit more white later on. You sort of get a little bit of a theme that it's okay to be expressive and to kind of, you know, go with what feels right. You know, if a color just sort of speaks to you, which is often what happens. Often when we're painting, we start just mixing a color and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's a cool color. Like maybe you're trying to mix a brown, and a brown is usually like a blue with an orange, so like your warm yellow and warm red and warm blue. But maybe you mix that orange and before you put the blue in, you're like, hey, that's kind of cool. I like that color. Let's use that color. Go with it. Absolutely. If that color is speaking to you, I think you should listen. Right? And follow it, put it somewhere on there. You can always paint over anything. So if it speaks to you and then you decide you don't like what it says, then get rid of it. Right? That's okay too. Where should I, I've got this little area here. I'm going to put this color right here. This doesn't exist anywhere in her painting because the painting ends right here, but I'm going to throw it there, and then if I don't like it, I can get rid of it. Okay, think that's pretty good. How about let's go to our cooler reds. Oh, and there's Deborah popped in to say hello, and Cheryl's there. Look at this. Awesome. Great group. Okay, so I'm going to take my... You can see I didn't even wash my brush. I didn't even wipe it. Or I may have wiped it off. But I didn't... I'm not... I like it when my paintbrush gets a little bit dirty with color. Because what ends up happening, not always, but you sometimes get colors that you don't expect on there, and it gives it a little bit of a look of slightly more complicated color. That there's, it's not like everything is just right out of the tube. And you know, if you're a beginner, that can be frustrating, because if you're trying to mix that same color again, and that paintbrush had all sorts of colors on it, I can understand why that might not be desirable, because it can make life a little bit trickier recreating that color. But especially in a painting like this, I think you should give yourself that freedom to play a little bit, and if you don't mix the exact right color again, I think you're going to be okay. Right? I think the paint police, you know, the paint police are, you know, they've got their sights set on someone like me, who's really making egregious violations of the rules here. So this color, you can see that I just painted this cool cool red. It's not a green at all, Michael. It's a red. So I just painted this cool red down here. Now it's obviously much darker in the image, but what I want you to see is that color is here, but she's then painted something darker over top of it, right? So I just painted this color here. It looks very similar to my warm red at the moment, right? But as this dries, then I'm going to paint a little bit something darker over top of it. And I think that's a really important little moment there, just to take a second to think about, because often if you're a beginner painter, there's, I think, the assumption that you have to mix on your palette before you start painting on the canvas. And while that can be true for some types of painting, at least in a traditional, more classical approach to painting, there's layering of sometimes dozens of colors over top of one another, and you might see what appears to be a green, for instance, but at no time was there actually a green mixed on the palette. What we've got instead might be blues with thin layers of yellow over top. And so the result looks green, but at no point was there green paint applied to the canvas. Does that make sense? Because that's just that's traditionally the way, like, Leonardo and Raphael and Michelangelo painted. Not Donatello, the other Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, because he was a sculptor. Okay, so same sort of thing. I'm going to paint this, my cool red here. Let's just paint that all the way down there. Just don't tell the paint police. Okay. Where else? Where else can I put this color at the moment? Again, we're just trying to fill it up. So even if we're not all exactly correct, that's okay. I wouldn't expect it to be anyway. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, I'm not even going to bother cleaning my brush from my cool red, because I'm going to mix a purple next. I'm going to take my cool red and my warm blue and mix these together to make purple. Now, depending on how much red or blue you put in here, you're going to get different kinds of purple. So this first purple that I'm making, I'm going to keep it like this because I want to just show let's say I'm going to paint it right in here. We've got a really dark purple. Really dark. And because I'm painting this purple over top of yellow, I'm getting a kind of a brownish color. And that might sound weird, like, why am I getting brown when I've just mixed a yellow and I've just painted a purple over top of a yellow? Well, it's because, right, if I'm mixing colors that are opposite from one another on the color wheel, they're going to move through the neutral core, right? And the neutral core is where we're going to get, as things get closer to neutral core, they get kind of brown. And if we add, ultimately they're going to go black, depending on the mixture. And if we add a little bit of, a little bit more maybe yellow in there, we're going to get closer to a brown. So that's why this purple looks kind of brownish, right? Conversely, rather than mixing, you know, our cool red and our warm blue together, because we get this really nice saturated purple, right? We could have mixed instead like our warm red and our cool blue, and we would have just naturally arrived at this color, right? In fact, it would actually be even darker, especially painting it on this warm yellow. Donna says, don't worry about the paint police. They're after me tonight. I live in the middle of nowhere, so good luck to them. That's pretty funny. Yes, absolutely. I think they're keeping an eye on all of us here, right? They always get a little bit nervous when we go live because it's like, oh, we're going to see some egregious violations of the rules tonight. Okay, where else should we go? So I'm just looking at the original here, just thinking, I'm gonna now, let's take a little bit of white. Now, if your purple just looks really kind of dour like that, when we put white and we tint that purple, all of a sudden it's gonna start coming back to life, right? Because especially the ultramarine blue is pretty dark, so it's gonna appear quite dark at first. And the same thing, if I paint this lighter purple, and I'm going to paint that a bunch of places, and then I come back later and mix the same purple that I painted right there, I'm going to get a much brighter, more saturated purple than I previously had. So we'll just paint these in all over the place. Okay. And I'll be honest, like, I mean, I don't know, we're still maybe about halfway through this painting right now, so I don't know what the final painting will look like, but I'm also going to allow myself, if, as the painting is developing, and I get kind of excited about a color, I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna jump off that high diving board into the deep end, and I think we can make it work. And you know, as always, just remember that the stakes are really low. Even if the painting doesn't turn out the way you want, first of all, that doesn't mean it's a bad painting, right? Just because we don't get what we want doesn't mean the world ends, right? It might feel like that sometimes, but what I would say is, first of all, just let it sit, and you might really come to love it later on. I've had that experience happen to me many times where I'm like, ugh, this is garbage, and then later you're like, whoa! You pull it out of storage, and you're like, did I make this? This is better than anything I've ever done. Oh, I remember I was going to throw this out, but I'm so glad I kept it. This is one of the best things I've ever done. The more you paint, the more you have those kind of revelatory experiences where you're just like kind of shocked, right? Okay. So let's do some yellows now. And you're like, wow, we've already got lots of yellow. But what we've got is this warm yellow that we thinned out and applied onto the background. So I think we want something that's got a little bit more intensity of pigment. And we also want to use our cool yellow. Our cool yellow is going to be a much brighter, more poppy yellow. So again, I'm going to mix a little bit of white into that because she's certainly done that a few places here. So what have I got? This here, let's paint this in. I think I was supposed to paint more blue there, so we'll come and do that later on. Get that yellow there. And then remember, I made a little boo-boo, right? I'm not too stressed out about it because I remember I painted this blue that went out of the line there. Just sort of wiped as much as I could away, and then I'm going to paint this yellow right over top. And it didn't completely obliterate it. If I want, I just do another layer and it'll disappear. Where else should this go? How about we put a little bit in the center here? This could be white there. Let's do this right here too. See, like slowly everything starts coming into focus. In fact, let's put this all the way around here. We got these, what's a little kind of fun, this little innovation in the bottom right corner of her painting, these little tiny red lines in there. I think that's kind of cool. So, but they're over top, I think, of the same yellow. So I'll just make sure I got that in place. There's a few places where that's gonna go. There's a bunch of places we're also gonna mix our own dark color shortly here. I think this is supposed to be a little bit more yellow, so I'll just paint over top of that a bit. Oh. So I just went and tried to grab a little bit more white, but I accidentally got some purple in there. That's okay too. You know, I'm just gonna paint right with it. I'm not so worried about making it totally perfect, because I also think it's gonna give it kind of fun little nuance of some unexpected colors that people are like, how did you mix that? And you go, I have no idea. It just sort of popped up. Okay. That's looking pretty good. We're getting into the zone, right? Now, oh, there was a green here. Let's just get that in. Maybe while I'm right here, before I go too much further. I'm going to take more of my blue. Maybe get more blue on here. Okay, so let's mix our darkest color next, and then we're going to apply that in a few places. We can even turn it into a bit of a gray. Now, again, my brush is a little bit dirty. The only thing I just don't really want is white on there. And did I have white on there? It doesn't even matter. So what I want to do is I'm going to mix my warm red and my cool blue together. Remember I said that if we mix this, we're going to get a really, really dark purple, almost a brownish purple, right? Because they're almost crossing right through the center of the color wheel, what we call the neutral core. So that's great. I mean, I could just paint that color and it's going to look really nice, but I think in fact, there's almost a bit of it right here. So let's just do this. Let's just paint that right there. I went a little bit overboard. I'm just going to leave it like that. But I think I want to make it still a little bit more black. So I'm taking my cool yellow and mixing this in here. And again, that's going to pull this color from one side of the color wheel firmly into the center. It can be a little bit tricky. Probably on camera, it's hard to actually see what color that is. Let's get a bit more. But when we add some white to it, which we will do eventually here in a moment, you'll see that it is almost like a perfect gray. And the benefit of being able to mix your own dark color is then we can have warm grays and cool grays, which are useful for painting, let's say, skies and giving atmosphere in paintings. So let's take this dark color, paint it here. Now it's mixing a little bit with my yellow. I don't mind that. Where else we got? Darker color. Now you could use a black for this, but it doesn't look like she's got any black in this painting at all. And I also think it's just kind of helpful to learn how to make these colors on your own, but certainly I think you'll be safe from any paint police persecution. Okay, it looks like I think I've got paint over pretty much everything. Oh, there's a few little areas where I need to put some white. So I'm just gonna, instead of wiping this right off, I'll just try and get a bit back onto the palette here, so I don't have to mix it too many more times. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of this white. Now I've got other colors in here, so just kind of be careful that I'm not stamping color all over the place. I mean, again, not a big deal, but you know, if you're concerned about that, then you might want to have your white on a different palette or something. Right, and so I accidentally picked up a bit of pink. It took pink into a part of the painting that I don't want, but that's okay. And I'll probably get a bit of yellow on it as I paint this. That's okay too. You know, it's funny, like when I teach at a university here in Vancouver, and one of the things that I hear all the time is students come up, is it okay if I do this and that? Is it okay if I do this? And I often think to myself, part of my role as a teacher is just to give people permission to do what they really want to do. Because they're not really sure are we allowed to do things like that? Is it okay? Am I going to ruin my painting if I do stuff like that? To which the answer is, I don't know. Why don't you see? Try it. If you don't like it, we can just start it all over again. Which, might sound like, oh, I don't really want to have to do that, but you might find you just don't know unless you do it, right? So now I'm just kind of going around with my white. Maybe it's just time. Actually, let's just take a second, because really, we could be finished right now, right? If we look at these, there's certainly some major differences, but I think if you were a total beginner and you got to this place, that would be a huge achievement, right? I'm going to keep on going and give more nuance to this painting and paint for about another 30 minutes or so. And just sort of give it a little bit more, I'm going to darken some of these colors, maybe lighten a few colors. And I'm going to use more and more her painting technique, at least the way she used it here, which is those like smaller brushes. So I'm going to probably go down to a smaller brush now. And just maybe paint different colors over different areas. So let's say in this area here, this magenta, I'm probably going to mix a little bit of a purpley color, give a little bit more blue into my magenta, which will give it that darker kind of quality. Same thing, kind of lightening up a few little areas. But I want to make quite clear that if you can get your painting to this level, you deserve a pat on the back, right? That's if you've never made a painting before and you can get here, then you are well on your way to painting anything in the world, right? And this should be, you should have a sense of accomplishment for getting to this point. I'm going to continue, and you can attempt to paint along. Things aren't going to get really that much more complicated, but I think, again, I just want to, because sometimes people get to this place and then they try to going a little bit further and things don't turn out the way they want and they feel like a failure. And, you know, it's sort of like climbing halfway up Mount Everest and the weather gets all bad and you can't actually get to the summit. Yeah, that might be kind of a bummer that you did get all the way to the very top of Mount Everest on your first attempt at climbing Mount Everest, but you certainly got further up Mount Everest than 99.9% of every human who has ever lived. That's a huge accomplishment, right? It's the same sort of thing like Apollo 13. Is it Apollo 13, the one that had that wasn't able to actually land on the moon? Yeah, that would be a huge bummer, going all the way to the moon and not actually being able to land, and instead kind of orbiting and almost dying and making it back to Earth. That's a bummer. But you didn't die on the dark side of the moon. You made it home safely. Your family can hug and kiss you again. Right? That's not... I would not consider that to be a failure. I would consider that to be like potentially more of a success than actually landing on the moon, because you've managed to live another day. Right? So... maybe there's lots of comments in here, so let me just see if I can pick out if there's anybody who has questions for me here. Oh, Deborah was late because they had a quick trip to the vet. Our fur baby is okay. That's good. When you have a sick pet, that is very stressful, for sure. Tanya says, if the paint police ever showed up, I'd invite them into tea. In for tea? That's scary. Sandra says, it's like that song, Listen to Your Heart. Who sings that? That's... dun, 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 dun. Oh my goodness. Sandra, why did you do that? That's good. No, that's, now you've put that earworm in my head. I remember that so clearly. It's like an 80s song, isn't it? Listen to your heart. I mean, it's a good song. That's a trivia question there. So if anybody can listen to your... Tanya says, so in essence, here we are moving from light to dark. Roxette. Tanya says Roxette. Thank you, Tanya. So Tanya says, in essence, are we moving from light to dark? I mean, potentially, I mean, there's going to be a few places where I'm actually going to lighten things up, but you probably, for the most part, we are getting darker. I mean, another one of the reasons why you have an Imprimatura is often the Imprimatura is actually usually even darker than the warm yellow that I put down. Often it's a bit more of a brown. And so one of the reasons artists might do that is that way you've kind of got your middle value in there, right? It's kind of like if you were to convert it to black and white, it's not black, it's not white nor black, it's like a gray. So by putting the Imprimatura in, you've sort of established that middle value. And then you can get darker, and you can also get lighter from there, right? And so here we're a little bit more on the lighter, so you're right, everything is mostly getting darker, right? If we compare, you know, even like really, it's at this point, the only things that have gone lighter are obviously the white and the yellow, the cool yellow that we added a white to, right? Almost everything, if you squint your eyes, has gotten, you're right, absolutely gotten darker. But we still reserve that little bit of area to get lighter again, right? I mean, that's a great point. I appreciate, you know, one of the reasons why I love doing these is people ask me often questions that helps me frame things in my own mind, because trying to explain some of these things can be tricky, and so I find it really helpful just as a teacher being asked questions that force me to try to explain things that might just reside in my head that I know but I've never tried to talk about before. Tony says, well, I'm sure we started with the warm yellow Imprimatura, but here I see that Michael is starting with lighter tones of the sections. Oh, okay, so I think I understand maybe a little bit more nuance there, right? So, yes, mostly what I'm starting with is just sort of the color without too much nuance, like kind of right out of the tube, or with our secondary colors. The secondary color is like a green or a purple or a orange, right? And then without making it like a darker orange or a lighter orange, just sort of the orange, right? And then I'm going to modify it, making it we've got our orange, we can make it a darker or lighter orange. Yes, very smart. Tony says, is it also because it's easier to fix lighter than dark? I don't know if it's easier to fix lighter than... I think they're both equally as easy to fix and difficult to fix. I really don't think in acrylic painting anything is really difficult to fix. I think we always have the option just taking white right out of the tube, and we could just paint right over this whole surface and start right all over again, right? We always have that option. That is sort of the nuclear option, or the other, you could just get a whole new canvas and start over again. It's maybe not the most desirable option, but I do think it's just important to remember that that option always exists, right? If you need to start over, that's okay, right? The world is going to come to an end. You're not a bad person. You're not awful at everything you do in life. It's just, you know, sometimes things happen, right? And painting always reminds us that things happen, right? Never does a painting go perfectly well from beginning to end. And I always use the metaphor of the roller coaster, that just when you think things are going up and you're like, wow, look at the view, everything's going perfectly, and then you get up to the top and you're like, wait a minute, you're holding on, right? And everything starts to fall apart, and you spill your water all over everything and the carpet, and it's like, what am I should just get a different hobby altogether. And then you just kind of stick with it. You try to like take some deep breaths, have some tea, and then the roller coaster comes down. You're like, whoa. That happens in every painting, and it sometimes happens a lot in most paintings. Sometimes you just have one of those plunging moments, but it will happen at some point in any painting you make. And you just have to go into a painting knowing that that's likely to happen, or that it will happen. And so when it does happen, it's like, oh, here we're on the down part of the roller coaster now. Let's just hold on, and we'll take some deep breaths and maybe enjoy it a little bit. And if we can kind of suss out what happened, then we can fix it, right? Okay, so let's, I guess we could call this like our background pass number 2, or foreground pass number 2, right? Because basically we've got what I would consider to have established the main part of the painting, and now we're just going to add nuance to that part of the painting, right? Okay. So let's think about, there's no real better or worse place to begin here. It's maybe whatever colors you might have already mixed on the palette that we want to apply next. Maybe let's go with the blue, since that's where we began with originally, and I wanted to use that to demonstrate a few things. So let's do that. Okay. This time again, I'm going to go down. I was using a... Let me see if there's an area where you can see these two brushes, right? So I was using that brush. I'm going to go to that brush now. Yeah, I'm going to turn this little fan on. The camera's getting a little toasty up there. Right, so not too much difference, but it's certainly, when we get into the details, having a smaller brush helps. Now I could go even smaller, but I also want to, you know, this is again one of our intro paintings, and I don't want to get too far down the well by getting nitpicky with my details. So let's just see what happens here. And if I take this ultramarine blue, my warm blue, right out of the tube, and I'm going to paint it in this area. This is, I think, the first place I started painting. You know, I get especially if I build up a thicker area, I'm going to get a pretty nice blue appearing here. It's going to be a little bit, it's still kind of maybe a little bit darker than I would have liked, but it's not bad, right? Like if we look at them side by side, you know, not bad. The thing is that when this dries, it's going to get darker. All right, let's just actually zoom back out a bit. So, you know, but let's live with it for a moment, and let's just see. Here's another area. Remember, this area I painted the warm blue with some white. Right, that's what we're going to paint here. So if I take the same color and I paint it here, all right, it's a little bit more transparent. Certainly not that dark, but it's got a bit more of like a richer bluish glow. And I might even do a little bit more. In fact, actually, let's just put a thicker application of paint here before I move on. There we go. It was a little bit thin there. So that gets us much closer to what I think that color should be. You can see I got a little bit of red, or a bit of that blue over top of my red, and actually went quite dark, which is not surprising. But so let's just continue. Let's look for another area. Right, again, this is an area that's basically like just recreating what we just did again. The same two blues. They're a little bit different because of what was underneath. So one appears a little bit darker. Where else can we do this here? You know, there was this side here, which we can't see in her painting, but I'm just going to paint my warm blue right over top. I haven't really had any instance at the moment yet to do any kind of what I was calling that kind of sweeping kind of technique, where we do little tiny marks. We can see that especially right in this green, but we'll tackle that when we get there. So these blues, okay. So here's, I made a little bit of, I didn't do the blue as well as I wanted, so let's just take some white and oops, that's in the wrong place. It's not on camera, Michael. So if you're here and you've got this little bit of paint that you're not happy with, what I would do is take my finger, assuming this area, the yellow's dry, and just sort of wipe into it. That way I get rid of that buildup of paint that might not be the desired color. And maybe since you know what, I'm going to do a little bit of white, more lighten this area up on this side too. And here's a bit of this kind of technique that she's using here. I'm probably going to come back over top of it with something a little bit lighter. Okay. This is a colder blue, I think, over top of a warmer blue, so we'll leave that. How about let's come up to here? So this is just right next to it. Again, I'll take my warm blue with some white. Again, I'm not worried about making a big solid patch of color. I'll let it be like that. You know, while I've got this white on my brush, how about let's come back down to this area here. We'll get the top of that color in. So it's a little bit too light, so let's just take a bit more blue. It's okay. I'll paint it like that. You know, the paint was kind of wet, so it's certainly not going to lighten up or get darker as much as maybe I'd want it to. But let's just leave it like that and push on, and we'll look at a few other areas. Maybe this area here I can darken a bit. I think I just need my blue without so much white in there for that part. Okay, let's look back up top here. So here's the top left corner of my painting. I'll take a bit of this. I had the white on my brush. I'm just going to exhaust a bit of it up top. And then I'm just going to take paint on here. Now I've got a little bit of red that I got on top there, so but that's okay. And I'm sort of doing my best. It's sometimes really hard to resist the urge to kind of fill in all the gaps. I guess in this area she did, so actually I was going to just defeat the point of what I was about to say as I look at hers. but she allows a little bit of that color, the texture from below to come through. So I'll just follow her lead, right? She's the master. So that there, this green, I think that's a cooler, darker blue. So we'll come back to that. So, you know, kind of going back to, I think it was, who was it? Like Tanya was saying about lightening color. I think I was sort of generally, I tend to, well, I'm trying to think, I do tend to kind of do a lot of the lightening and then go and do a bunch of the dark, like, so if I'll kind of usually lighten up all my blues and reds and greens, oranges, and then I'll tend to kind of darken things down. Often, sometimes I'll do, if depending on the painting, I might do lighten and darken a blue, and then lighten and darken a red. So it's not always at like one exact approach throughout an entire painting, but certainly in this one it is. So let's just take a look and just see how we're doing so far here. All right, we just sort of did a bit of work in this area here. Where else? What else should we do? Oh, there was this warm blue down here. It's a bit darker than what she did. Really see that just seems kind of impenetrably dark. It almost, it's actually this blue that I did, it's even darker than my darkest dark right now. Let's put a little bit of white back into this color. And then as I'm going further away, it just becomes kind of drier. We'll do this a few more times and all over the place, so don't worry if you feel like you just missed it. In fact, let's do that down here and I'll zoom in. Or let's do... Let's do the same sort of thing. I'm going to take my warm blue. Which way should we? Why don't we go the opposite direction? So we'll start darker down here on the bottom. I might even get a little bit more of a darker blue later on. Let's just get a bit more white on here. Doesn't even have to be that much more white. I might just wipe a bit off on a rag. And you know what? Actually, I've kind of almost blended that too well. I think we want to have a little bit more of this type of a brush stroke quality. So I'm actually just going to go back with my blue and just make more pronounced marks in there. And then I'm going to go just a little bit more of a lighter. But I mean, you're welcome to, like, if you want it to be a nice fade that's seamless, that's certainly different than the way that she worked, but that's not wrong. It's just different, right? And I think as you notice your own kind of sense of taste and You can embrace those kinds of things, or you can move away from them. It's totally up to you. You've got, it's your painting. You can make it however you like. In fact, I think I'm going to do the same sort of thing right here. I'm going to take my little bit lighter blue, and I'm just going to kind of and even right up top here, I think I want to get a little bit darker. And all this paint is kind of dry right here, which I don't mind, because it's if it's a little bit drier, it might be easier to do this technique than if you're using big gobby wet paint. Right? This is what we call like a dry brush technique. So we just see these kind of side by side. Right, I'm just right up here in the top right corner. So if we just zoom in a bit here. All right, and then let's just get a bit more of my, where am I? Up here, there we are. my warm blue, sorry. Ooh, this is much darker. That's okay. Actually, not that much darker than it was. It just felt kind of dark. On this side, I'm okay with that, but maybe let's just go for something not quite as dark. Okay. Let's zoom back out. Let's see how this is working. You know, and I can imagine that there's times, you know, anyone who's just maybe watching where they might be like, oh, I think I liked it better the way it was before you started doing that there. I think it looked better. Like, hey, that's totally possible. Absolutely. And that would be okay too. Let's see. Where should we go to next? Have we done enough of the blues? Can I move away from... Let's do the cool blues, a little bit of the cool blue. Let's take our cool blue. I want to just replicate a little bit of what we just did. Maybe down here. Where else does he? Oh yeah, there's some. So actually, here's where we see a lot more of those brush strokes that she uses. So let's zoom in a bit there. Let's go a little bit darker. So this is our cool blue here. Kind of like little stripes. Again, I could use a smaller brush to get more detail, but I'm pretty happy with just kind of a little bit of something a little bit lighter, or thicker, I mean. So let's mix this green that she's using here again. Let's use that for right now. So there's a bit of white in there, that's why. Well, not the color exactly that I want, but I'm just going to use it elsewhere while I've got it on my brush. Let's see if there's a few more places I can... Again, if I get a bit more white on it, I can paint this. What's going on in here? Something weird. I'm not sure what's... Oh, that's supposed to be lighter. Okay. We'll do that. How about right up top here? Let's again take the same color. It's a little bit lighter than I'd want it to be. Before I just start washing my brush to get something darker. That should be darker. Okay, so what I want to do is just get rid of the white that's on my brush, because it's going to make everything a little bit pastel, and I think we want a little bit less of that lighter tinted green. We want something a little bit darker. So I'm going to mix this again. So this is, again, my cool yellow and cool blue together. And I'm even going to take a little bit of my darker color and just mix that in. And what this does, you know, you could even just add a little bit of warm red. In fact, let's just do a little bit of warm red. Because remember, this is the color that we mixed warm red into this exact mixture of cool yellow and cool blue to get our darker color. So it's basically the same thing. So now we've got a green that is much darker. In fact, we almost have to be careful that it's not too dark. Oops, I'm not on camera, sorry. In fact, this is maybe a little bit too dark for a few places. So let's just... I'm just going to wipe it away. There's a few other places where it would work, maybe in here. So I'm going to keep this paint. I'm not going to paint over it. I'm just going to mix another version of it next to it that's just not quite as dark. And that way I can pull a little bit of that darker color in if I wish. And then now let's just... Actually, I think I'm going to go even darker there in a little bit. here I will take my darker green and put this in right here. And it looks like it gets a little bit more bluish at the top there, so I'm just going to mix a little bit of blue in there. Just barely noticeable difference, but hey, why not? If we're going to all the trouble. Okay. Oh, I was going to go a little bit darker here too. So let's just take a little bit of a darker green. Okay. Darker green in here. Okay, let's zoom back out and just see how that looks at this stage. Oh, that was already okay. I mean, you can see I'm cutting a few corners here. I'm not worried about making it perfect. There's a few little areas that, you know, I probably would spend more time on elsewhere, but Ravi says, I painted it too dark. It's looking way different. The paint police will catch me. And Pascal says, it's too dark only if you're trying to make a copy, maybe. Otherwise, it's still a color experiment. No worries, Ravi. So, you know, if colors are getting a little bit darker, that could mean that, you know, maybe the Imprimatura was a little bit dark to begin with. Or maybe when you're mixing some of those first colors, they might be a little bit muddy. And you know, again, like we said, our yellow and our blue, or sorry, our blue and our red, when we apply it directly onto this yellow background, or even if it was a brown background, it's going to get much darker really quickly, right? So you might want to add a little bit of white into those initial areas and then paint over them with the color that you do want, just like we did with this blue. Right now we've got much closer to the blue that we actually want. Remember, this is what happened when I just paint. This is the exact same blue that I painted here that's here, just that this I just painted directly onto the yellow Imprimatura, whereas this I first painted some it looked exactly like this, and then I painted my ultramarine blue over top of it. Now you could see very clearly the differences between those two. Okay, I'm going to take my dark color again. Remember, this is my warm red, cool blue, and cool yellow together, and I'll paint that in a few places. This is basically a black. And like I said, you can use a black if you want. She didn't, and I'm going to try to follow her lead. I'm going to paint a little gray in here in a little bit, but I'll just wait. Just want to use up this. I'm going to paint with this dark color while it's on my brush. And you can see all of a sudden all these areas that were kind of semi-transparent, they're just darkening up dramatically. So we'll be done in about 15 minutes at the latest here, so don't worry about making it perfect. So how about let's, have I done everything I want to do with that dark color? I think that's good. So let's take, remember I was going to take my magenta. All right, let's take our magenta, and then I'm just going to take a little bit, this is my warm blue, and take just a little bit of this warm blue, mix it in here, maybe just a little bit more. So now I've got a little bit of a purpley quality, and I can paint this over top. I think I still need a little bit more. Now I could take some of my dark color and do this. That would work totally fine, especially if you find this color looks too purpley. Right, I kind of like this semi-transparent thing. I might do a little bit of both. I might paint this like that and do a few more areas. This is another area, was a similar sort of thing. In fact, this area I just painted the purple there. But here now I'm painting the purple over top of a lighter purple. You can see the effect. Okay, let's do the same thing here. Any more of that? Let's do this. We'll do more of this. So this is basically the same thing, just a little bit darker. This is just my warm blue. There's more warm blue to cool red in that area. In fact, I'm going to paint this right here. I know this is supposed to be a dark color, but since I already wiped that off my brush, I'm just going to paint that purple there. Ooh, and there was, well, that one I want a bit of white in there. Let's take them. I'm going to do this right here. Remember I said I was going to add a little bit of darker color in there. Now I'm kind of scraping some of that paint away, but it actually looks pretty close to the original, doesn't it? Okay, I'm going to take the same color. Let's just add a bit of white to it. Oops, that's in the wrong area. I just painted that in the wrong place. So if you do that, that's okay. Life still is going to continue forward. I'm just going to get a little bit of water on here and try to wipe that off. If you do it quickly enough, you can kind of get rid of it. Now, I'm going to paint this in the so-called right place above it. And get a bit more of a magenta purple. So we're just scanning around. Oh, right up here. Let's just get a bit of, oops, that was a lot more white than I was expecting. That's okay. Any more? Oh, here's a purple. I forgot I was going to do a gray, didn't I? Just sort of dropped that ball. We'll come back to that. And let's just put this here. It's not exactly the right color, but we want to wrap up pretty soon. We've been painting for a couple of hours, so it's okay to you don't have to be painting all night long. Oh, let's put a bit more of this purple right in here. Guess that's very much the same, so we'll and there was a bit more of a lighter purple up here. Okay, purple, or act now or forever hold your peace, because, well, let's do a little bit more, I guess, right in here. There's always going to be little parts of a painting where you're like, oh, I forgot that. How did that happen? I guess let's just darken this a bit. So, I mean, I still have this. I'm going to take a little bit even more ultramarine blue and apply it here. Just see. I mean, ultimately, eventually, I might be able to brighten this blue back up to a desired level. Like, I'd have to just build up a lot of layers to get to that point, though. Maybe let's just do a little bit of that here. Let's see, the question is from Ravi. Says, as I'm painting, I have a habit of rotating my canvas, and I follow my brush and so I don't think that's a, you certainly, I mean, one of the reasons why I like painting on a table is the ability to turn the canvas as often as you like. Like, if it's easier for you to paint with the canvas on a little bit of an angle, that's totally fine. You don't have to apologize for that. That's totally fine. Whatever feels most comfortable for you. And everyone is going to be a little bit different, right? So don't be too hard on yourself about that. There's no reason to be hard on yourself about that at all. I'm going to take a bit of white, and I'm going to mix a bit of my gray now. So remember, this is my dark color. Here's what it looks like when we add a little bit of white to it. It's literally a gray, right? So maybe I'm going to add, where should I add? Where was I? Maybe this is a little bit almost too light. Is there a area of gray that's lighter than this? I don't think so. So I'm just going to darken it a bit. Maybe even, oops, it's going to be a little bit lighter than expected. take, actually let's just get rid of that white on there. So I think I'm pretty close. Like, I think at this point what I want to do is some oranges and reds, and I guess there's a little bit of green, but that'll come in when I do some oranges. And then just that down there. Okay. So let's go. Remember I was saying this red here, I wanted to be like red right out of the tube, like a really nice bright warm red, but I put white in there to help ensure that it would be as dark as possible. So now we'll go back over top of this with this warm red right out of the tube. And now we get something that's just much brighter, much more saturated color. Same thing, we had some warm red right here. I guess I'll do a little bit of this, and then I kind of go around and touch things up a little bit at the end. Get some warm red up here. Where else? Who need warm red? Warm red. Who needs warm red? And little parts of the painting. Warm red over here. I need warm red. Give me the warm red. It's like little baby eagles in a nest on the top of a mountain, right? They're all begging for a little bit of some fresh red worms. So I'm just going around, dropping little bits of warm red. Do the same kind of thing down here. I want a bit of, it's not exactly what she did here, but it doesn't matter. It's my painting at some point, right? So I get to do whatever I want down there. Just a little bit of that blending. And then I'm going to take a bit of white. There. Get lighter, that's gonna get lighter. Oh, just realized this. I want it to be warm red. Okay, yes, and some more white to make a pink. And these very deliberate sort of strokes up here. Cool red down there. Let's get even more white. So I'll be wrapping up in about 8 minutes. Where else? Is that good? Can I live with, let's do, I'm just gonna take my cool red, yeah. Do the same sort of thing with my darker, I forgot this little area up here. a bit more orangey, isn't it, that little area? Let's just get a bit of orange on here. And while I've got this on my brush, so this is just my cool red and warm yellow. While I'm here, I'm just taking this brush, just letting it get kind of dirty. Let's take our warm blue and just put that on the brush. You get this kind of green, grassy or green right there. It's a little bit too dark. Just my warm, my warm yellow. I just put a little bit of white, but maybe a bit too much. So I'm just gonna wipe that off and then paint that there. I guess I could go a little bit darker, couldn't I? Always finding new little things in every painting. White goes down there. Magenta with some red again. Different kind of pink right down here. Okay, I'm gonna take some of my cool yellow without really washing my brush or anything. Gonna put it in a few places. This is a pretty thin color, so it's gonna kind of just barely sort of change the color below it, which I like a lot. That cool yellow. Okay, have I got everything done? Oh, this is a little bit cooler, kind of almost a bit of a gray there. Let's just get a bit of this gray. Again, using a bit of this dry brush technique. And greenish white, very mostly white. Just where was I? Could still be more green. Okay, so I think the last little details that I want to add, maybe I'm just going to take a bit of this cool blue, just put this up top here. Why not? A little bit more bold than what she did. And maybe just a bit of, actually I need to add a little bit of white. I'm gonna add, oops, I'm gonna add this kind of a lighter, this cool blue here. I just really like that, so I'm gonna make that cooler blue than she did here. Let me just shape that a little bit better. Okay, so the last thing is just these tiny little marks in the bottom right corner. Oh, I thought those were little tiny red dots, but they're not. I'm going to paint it the way that I saw it, for better or worse. So I'm going to take my warm red and some white, just so it's not quite as harsh. And then that's interesting. Going up and seeing it up close, it definitely is a little different than I was expecting, but this is what I'm going to do down here. You don't have to do this at all. Yikes. I just thought that, like, these little marks down here added something kind of really weird and strange and different to the rest of the painting, so that you're just like, whoa, what's that doing there? That doesn't belong. Okay, I think I'm okay just walking away at this point. Obviously, you know, I'm working maybe a little bit faster than I normally do. and maybe not as, certainly not as much precision as I would otherwise, but you know, it's not too far off the original. I mean, it's pretty close. Oh, there's some, what did I do here? Well, now I notice that maybe there could be some purple and some greens up there. Maybe I'll just do a little bit more of a nuanced green really quickly. And then a little bit of purple really quickly. Oh, let's just take this purple. And then since I got a bunch of this paint, it will otherwise just go to waste. Let's see, I'm just going to shape that a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so I think we're pretty close there. I think I'm pretty happy with the way things have turned out with this painting. So I just wanted to, before we move into our side-by-side comparison, to finish it off, what I like to do always is to just give a little bit of just a sign the painting with a Sharpie or a pencil, depending on what kind of surface you're painting on. So I'll make sure I get her name absolutely right. Oh. Come on. So on Thursday, we're going to be painting a painting she made 5 years before this, but I think it's a little bit more complex. So that's why we're sort of doing things a little bit out of chronological order here. So, we'll do our side-by-side comparison. Just before we do that, just as a reminder to like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, take a photograph of the artwork you made, upload it to the Facebook group. And if you haven't joined the Facebook group already, it's the first link in the description below. If you also want to leave a donation, even $1, to support the channel, to help keep all of this up and running and pay for the internet and all that bandwidth and all that kind of stuff, that would be super awesome. I'd be very grateful to receive any donation. You can also use the super chat function, PayPal. There's if you want to contact me through my email, which is on the Facebook group, or my website. All those links are down below. That would be awesome. Okay, so let's look at these two side by side. Pretty happy. I think maybe there's areas that might be a little bit, they're actually darker on my side of things and maybe don't appear on camera, but pretty good. Okay, yeah, I mean, little nuances of little things in here, but you know, for a couple of hours of painting, I think that's pretty good. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining me, for painting along with me. I hope that wasn't too complicated. As I was trying to throughout today's episode, just remind people that you don't have to, you could have stopped about an hour ago, right? If you, this was all sort of bonus, just getting it a little bit more precise, but it's certainly okay if you kind of just wanted to kind of keep it relatively simple. So on Thursday, we're going to be doing something a little bit more complex. We're going to be doing our first portrait of this new Master Study kind of season 2, and it's still going to be very expressive. We're not using the traditional portraiture techniques that we have used, let's say, in some of our other more complex paintings. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Even a beginner painter, I think, should be able to tackle Thursday's painting no problem. Again, all of the templates and stuff are in the Dropbox folder, so if you want to get those ready, as I've already got them ready, that will make things a little bit faster for you. Okay, everybody. So, having said that, we will sign off for the day. Enjoy the rest of your evening wherever you are on our beautiful planet, and we will see you again very soon. Good night, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon.